Anthracite coal produces a lot of heat but can be difficult to ignite. The traditional method is to layer coal on top of a well-established hardwood fire, but people have looked for quicker methods and have resorted to using coal mice, pieces of road flare, and even propane torches. I'm going to demonstrate what I believe is a much simpler and much quicker method that utilizes commonly found ingredients such as paper shreddings and scrap wood that might be in your yard if it fell off of a tree. In about 45 minutes we're going to end up with a fire that looks like this. We start with paper shreddings on the left, which we'll put at the bottom of the firebox, and layer progressively larger twigs and small branches on top. We'll start with a clean and empty anthracite coal stove firebox. You can see the grates that allow air to come up through the coal bed. We'll start initially by putting in the paper, and we'll add obviously more ingredients than I showed. In fact, I'll add a whole basket of shreddings, and then begin to layer the small twigs on top in a loosely configured pile. The time is displayed on the left, and we're about 1 minute into the process. At this point you should have fuel that looks like this, and we want to open the manual pipe damper above the firebox to allow exhaust gases to leave, as well as the ash pan door, which will be helpful in allowing plenty of oxygen to the fire. We light the paper and eventually close the fill door. This really provides a lot of oxygen to the fire, and the fire takes off very quickly. Unlike a traditional wood stove where fire comes from oxygen supplied only from above the fire, the coal stove allows oxygen to enter the firebox from below and burns the fuel quickly. We're going to now add some larger branches to the existing fire. And on top we're going to put even larger, maybe 1 to 1.5 inch logs. After 5 minutes we see a fairly well established small wood fire in the center of the firebox, which continues to grow in intensity. And the goal here is to simply add more and more wood in the form of larger and larger logs. At this point, after the fire has begun to be fairly healthy, we want to start flattening out the fire. At 7 minutes, that newly added fuel has started to catch, and again we're going to add more. We want to keep the logs fairly close together, and we want to flatten them, and in other words put them in a horizontal way. The reasons for that will become clear in a few minutes. By 9 minutes we have some fairly large pieces of tinder burning, and we simply let that go, let it have plenty of oxygen. We keep the ash pan door and the manual pipe damper open the entire time to ensure plenty of oxygen. And here the minutes are ticking by, and we're just letting that wood that we've added ignite and add more as the earlier wood is ignited. And at 13 minutes we're adding maybe 2-inch logs at this point. Again, we want to keep the fuel in the form of the logs horizontal and fairly close together. We again give that plenty of oxygen and allow that to catch, but by about 15 minutes we're ready to add our first coal. The goal here is to layer a small amount of coal in the spaces between the logs. This allows the coal to be suspended on top of the logs, and the flames and oxygen come up between the logs and begin to ignite the first few pieces of coal. Once the coal is ignited, it becomes much easier to ignite additional coal. So the goal here is to utilize the rapidly released heat from the wood and ignite those pieces of coal that are just resting between the logs. By 16 minutes, you can see that there are fewer sort of wood flames, but presumably that heat is entering the newly added coal and beginning to ignite it. Again, we let it go for several minutes so that it's beginning to ignite the coal. The wood, meanwhile, has plenty of oxygen to keep burning and releasing heat. And at this point, we add more coal on the fire, on top of the fire, but also beginning to add coal around the fire. This will have the effect of at least preheating the coal. And by 19 minutes, we've added perhaps 10 pounds of coal at this point. Some of it has landed between the logs and others has rolled down, but that's okay. Ultimately, we're going to need to fill the entire firebox with coal anyway. But you can see that the quality of the flames is changing. This is looking a little bit more like a coal fire than a wood fire. The volatile gases are being released from the coal and they're starting to burn. And the fire now begins to suck a lot of oxygen, which can be heard with air rushing through the ashpan door. And when we believe that some of that coal may have begun to start, we can add a little bit more at a time, mostly on top of the coal-wood combination fire. And it's okay to damp out the flames. That's the purpose, to get the heat into the coal. So that's not a problem. This stove will continue to give plenty of oxygen to support combustion of both the wood and the newly burning coal. At 25 minutes, you can see what flames are visible again differ from a traditional wood fire. It's difficult to say precisely how, but they look somewhat different. At 27 minutes, more and more flames and more volatile gases are burning above the fire. You can see in rapid flames that are released. This method takes advantage of the heat that's released, which is considerable from small sticks that burn, to begin to ignite the coal. At this point, we add more coal and we begin to add it all around the periphery of the fire to cover the entire floor of the firebox. So by about 30 minutes, we have definite burning coal, and once we've added the coal throughout the entire periphery, this is what it looks like. And in another 5 minutes or so, we have what begins to look more like a coal fire than a wood fire, although the pieces of wood can obviously be seen. But this is what it looks like. The goal here then is to add more and more coal until you reach the top of the fire bricks.